Welcome to the channel. In today's video, we are going to be installing a cam chain tensioner upgrade on this BMW R1100S, as well as adjusting the valves. So this procedure is going to translate over to all R1100 and R1150 models. It'll pretty much be the exact same. So follow along and let's get to it. Step one is going to be removing both of these carbon fiber valve cover covers. Next, we'll be removing the spark plug cover here, and then the valve cover. Then using a coil tool, which I will have linked below, can remove our coil correctly without damaging it. Now removing the valve cover, super straightforward. We're just using a T40 Torx, and this one with that valve cover. There's just different nuts here that require a 6-point socket. Majority of you are not going to have that. So now with a drain pan underneath, we can go ahead and remove our valve cover there. And then obviously we're going to have to do the same thing over here on the other side. With a 16 millimeter, I'm going to grab the spark plug out of here just to make the engine a lot easier to rotate when we're adjusting our valves. I'm going to throw a new spark plug in here just because it's kind of corroded, and might as well since we're here. Now this particular bike is a 2-spark model, so there's 2 spark plugs per cylinder. So you have to remove these little covers on the underside of the engine, and that's going to give us access to our second spark plug. And that's going to be removed with the same 16 millimeter socket. Pull this front cover off. It's just 4 T25 Torx. And once I get this off, that's be a good time to inspect our alternator belt and be able to spin the motor in order to complete our valve adjustment and cam chain tensioner upgrade. So now that we've gotten all 4 of those T25s out, we can just go ahead and remove this plastic cover, exposing our crankshaft bolt right there. So getting a closer look in here at our alternator belt, I can tell that the alternator belt actually has kind of a chunk taken out of it, and it's starting to shred. So now is a good time to replace that alternator belt. All right, so I have a new alternator belt on here. I didn't film it. That'll be a whole separate video. But what we're going to do is rotate this crank nut in the direction of rotation. So the direction of rotation for the engine is going to be going this way. So we're technically going to be loosening this nut. It's not actually going to loosen, but we're going to have it on loosen mode. And that's going to crank our engine in its normal direction of rotation. And what we're going to do is we're going to rotate the engine up to top dead center. All right, so what I like to use to rotate the engine up, or to actually feel the piston, is just a long screwdriver. You can feel the piston right there. People kind of freak out about this, saying I should use a zip tie or something, but it doesn't provide the same amount of feedback, and this does not cause any damage. So I'm spinning it in the normal direction of rotation. You can see the pistons going all the way down there. Socket fell off here. You can see the pistons going down, and then it's coming back up here. So we're going to wait until right. When it changes direction there, you can see it started to go back down. So I'm going to go backwards, go a little bit beyond, and then get it right at top dead center right there. So I know the piston's at top dead center because I can physically feel it. So now we can adjust our valves. So I can tell you right now that the left side is at top dead center overlap because there's no lash in the valves. This is tight here, so both of these are just slightly being pushed on. That's what we're going to call top dead center overlap. Both valves are open just slightly, and they're overlapping. Now heading over to the right side, these valves should have a little bit of slack. As you can see, maybe here. So that's what we're going to call top dead center compression. So both valves are totally closed. This is the side we're going to adjust first. We're going to rotate the engine 360 degrees. Then this side is going to be on top dead center overlap, and the other side will be on top dead center compression, and then we'll adjust the other side, and then we'll install the cam chain tensioner while we're on top dead center compression. So these have lash, so let's check that. Okay, so this is our exhaust side, and for our exhaust side, we're going to run 0.30 millimeters, and then for our intake side, we're going to be running 0.15 millimeters. So we'll check our intake side first. Seems pretty good. Maybe a little loose, honestly. With the feeler gauge in there, I can still feel a little bit of slack. Yeah, these are both pretty loose. And then check our exhaust side here. Exhaust side feels really good. Kind of the analogy I like to use when doing this is it should feel like you're dragging it across a magnet. You shouldn't have to use a ton of force to get it in there, but there should be just very minimal resistance when you're checking it. Just enough to support the actual gauge itself. And I know BMW calls out to use check both of these at the same time with 2 feeler gauges. I sell a kit to do that, and I'll have that linked below, but it's not absolutely essential that you have 2 feeler gauges in here at the same time. But exhaust side here feels really, really good. The intake side needs to be tightened up a little bit, which is kind of odd. Usually these wear tight as the valve wears into the head. So it kind of takes up clearance. So that tells me that this was just misadjusted at some point. Not detrimental to the motor, but probably missing out on a little bit of performance. So let's go ahead and tighten these up. Okay, so this is the intake side. In order to adjust it, I'm just going to tighten it up. So I'm going to put a 3 mil Allen in there and a 10 mil here. I'm just going to hold this Allen here stationary. I'm going to loosen up the 10 mil. I'm going to give this Allen just a tiny bit and then tighten that up. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the upper side. So I'll just keep the Allen, loosen that, give this a tiny bit, and then tighten it. And then check it out. So right there actually feels really good. It's no longer loose. It's just enough force to where I can easily put it in there and it supports its own weight. And there's no other slack. Let's check this side. Perfect there. So I know a question you're asking, how did I know how much to turn there? Well, I've done this a lot. And like I mentioned about the whole top dead center overlap and top dead center compression thing, this side here is on top dead center compression. So I'm going to move this piston with just a screwdriver down here. I can reassure you this will not cause any engine damage. You can try using a zip tie or something softer, but you won't have very good luck. So here we're coming up on top dead center. It just switched directions there. So I'm going to go back and then write the normal engine rotation direction and leave it right there. So this side is at top dead center, confirmed. Now there should be some play in here. I don't know if you can hear that, but there's some play in there. And the other side, there shouldn't be any play whatsoever. Let's check the clearance on the intake side. So the intake side here, what are we working with here? Again, that kind of feels, yep, that's pretty loose, just like it was on the other side, about the same amount of looseness on both of these. Let's check the exhaust side here. Exhaust side actually feels pretty good. The lower one here is pretty loose, but the upper feels pretty good. Just enough clearance there to support the weight of these feeler gauges, but I bet you if I pull, yeah, it's pretty good. So with that in there, I can push it in and out on it, and it won't fall out. Where the bottom one, it would just fall right out if I moved it around, just like that. So we'll tighten up these 3. So just like we did earlier, I'm going to put this 10 mil wrench there. This on here, this needs to be tightened. So we're going to loosen that. I'm just going to give it an eighth of a turn. Tighten that up. Same thing here. Loosen that and give it a little turn. Tighten that up. And the same thing here. Loosen that up, give it a turn, tighten it up. And now let's check them again. So this top exhaust was never touched. Feels the same, exactly as I'd expect. This bottom exhaust feels perfect. So now you can see that if I move it, it doesn't want to fall out anymore, and it feels as if I'm dragging it across a magnet. These feel about exactly the same. Let's move over here to the intake side. That feels perfect, and then perfect again. So when I move it, there's no more slack in there, and that feels just barely any resistance. I can easily slide the feeler gauge in and out of all of these. And that's where we're going to leave it. Now we're going to install that upgraded cam chain tensioner. All right, so that cam chain tensioner, the factory cam chain tensioner, is located right there. That hex nut, you can probably just barely see it down deep in there, and that's what we're trying to access. So in order to get that, we're going to remove this throttle body, tuck it off to the side, and we should be able to access that with, I believe, a 17 millimeter wrench. So again, this side over here is still on top dead center compression, and we are going to loosen up this hose clamp, and this hose clamp. So these three hose clamps are all loose. We can then unplug our throttle potentiometer. There's going to be a zip tie right here that needs to be cut, and then we can just remove our injector with these two 4 millimeter Allen bolts on each side. So there's two Allen bolts, they're 4 millimeter. I'm going to get these loosened up. Then once we removed those, we can just pull our injector straight on out of here and unplug it right on top here. And then there's a ground wire on the bottom of the throttle body. Obviously, because the throttle body is isolated with non-conductive stuff. So once we have all three of these hose clamps loosened up, we're going to have to gain access to undo the screws that are actually holding this pipe in. So there's some like screws that are screwed into the airbox into this pipe. In order to do that, you're going to have to remove the left panel. So we'll have to remove our seat, obviously, and then there's these 3 millimeter bolts. They're there. One right here. One right there and one right there. And then there's one hidden, like right here on the inside. And then there's another one hidden right behind the BMW rondelle here. And then with this flipped up, we can very carefully remove our panel, not to forget to disconnect the left turn signal here. So now there's two screws that retain this pipe in, one right there and another right here. So now, with those out, should just slide this right up in, remove our throttle body, and just kind of tuck all of this off to the side so we can gain access to our cam chain tensioner right there. So now we can remove our cam chain tensioner here. Here we go. So now going over the differences between the old one and the upgraded one. So the old one is literally just a little pipe or whatever we'll say with a spring, and this tensioner relies on, obviously the spring kind of holds constant tension, we'll say, on the chain, but it really relies on oil pressure that goes in that hole there. If I push down, you can kind of see that. It really relies on oil pressure to hold tension on this, and since it's positioned this way, when the engine's shut off, the oil just drains out of the tensioner. So then when you start it up, every time you start it, it's getting like a dry start without oil. So the upgraded one here doesn't have a spring, and this pipe here more or less is the spring. And within that pipe, if you can see down in there, there's a check ball. So once this thing has oil pressure, that check ball retains the oil pressure, and the bike will effectively, the tensioner will always start with pressurized oil inside of it. So basically just prevents that rattle on startup, and it's just a big upgrade as far as a reliability and just a smooth operation standpoint. So big upgrade. I'll have it linked below. If you have an R1100 or an R1150, I highly suggest getting one. So we'll just throw this one away, pretty much junk, and swap it out for the new one. And then this tensioner, you don't need to worry about it like falling into the engine. You can literally just drop it down in here. It's not going to fall in. It'll just rest right there. And then the new body will go right in there. And we just need to hold pressure down on it and get that first thread started. Once we get that first thread started, it should be smooth sailing, and it's a 15mm wrench. All right, now the tensioner's in, we can go ahead and reinstall our throttle body and fuel injector and all that jazz. So if you removed those two T30 Torx, those will both have to go back in. We can get our fuel injector put into our throttle body, and then these two 4mm Allens tightened up, and our fuel injector plugged in. We can then slide our airbox boot over our throttle body here. And then we can reinstall our screws that hold the intake pipe in place. And then we can tighten up our three throttle body hose clamps. Install our plug for our throttle potentiometer, and then we'll reinstall our ground for our throttle body electronics. And then now that we have everything back together, I'm just going to ensure that our engine rotates smoothly. So you'll be able to see right there, it's coming up. That was top dead center overlap on this left side. I can just tell by looking at it. Now we're going to come up on top dead center compression. Yep, but it rotates smoothly. So I'm just going to do a couple rotations, and then we'll get our valve covers back together, and then we'll run the bike and see how it sounds. And then we can install new upper and lower spark plugs. And I will have all the parts that I use in this video, such as the alternator belt, upper and lower spark plugs, the cam chain tensioner upgrade. I will have all that stuff linked below. And then since we had our throttle bodies off, I'm going to quick check the synchronization on these. I'm using the DigiSync tool. This is my new favorite sync tool. Reason being, it's completely battery powered, so you don't have to hook up jumper leads to the bike. It calibrates itself automatically, turn it on. It's just a really user-friendly unit to use. So you just turn it on, and then ready to go. Hook these up to the throttle body, and it's a digital readout, gives you RPM and everything, so it's really easy to check synchronization and adjust if necessary. So we're just going to quick check it. Might need a little bit of adjustment. We'll obviously have to fire it up here, but we'll get her dialed in. So once again, this isn't a throttle body synchronization video. I've done it before, but we're just going to quick check it. I'm not going to go totally deep into all the details on this. Again, I've already made a video on this. I'll have that, peruse my channel for it. And then hook the other vacuum port up to this throttle body. So let's fire the bike up. So I can tell you right now that the throttle body synchronization is off considerably just by listening to it. So we have 60 on our left side, it looks like, and then 65 on our right. So I'm just going to make some adjustments to this idle screw right here. I'm going to start by going out. I'm going to turn around and go back in. I'm going to leave it turn and a half out. So we're just making some adjustments here on this screw here. I'm going to move this one out a little bit further. You can see our RPMs start creeping up. I'm going to see what it is off idle. So here I am wondering why I can't get it to synchronize and why it's so far off. We are missing the idle adjustment screw on the, that should never be touched, honestly. You only adjust your idle with these brass screws, and that screw under there is just straight up missing. So after a lot of time synchronizing, I have the idle pretty much dialed, and then the off idle pretty much dialed as well. So the bike sounds really good now. So after that's over with, should have made a video synchronizing, but that would have been a long video, and that's not what this video is about. So we'll get our left side body panel put back on. Get our seat reconnected here. And then our seat cover thing. Thank you so much for watching this video with me. If this video helped you out in any way, please consider subscribing to my channel. I pump out tons of videos just like this one all the time, and it's you guys that keep me motivated to make me more videos. Drop a like, comment down below what you'd like to see next, and as always, have a safe ride.